Hi sharpshooters, today I have some tips for you with the Ar15. Everybody has gripes against the Ar15 trigger because it's a lousy trigger. Well, I'm going to show you how to simply and quickly greatly improve the trigger on the Ar15. That standard old lousy mil-spec trigger that they come with, I'm going to show you guys how to really tune it up without any special tools, nothing fancy needed. This is really simple. I'm also going to show you the simplest way in the world to get rid of the receiver slop, the slop and wiggle between the upper and lower receiver, which this one has quite a bit of actually, and it really bugs me. Anyway, on with the show. I'm Jordy Buck, and this is Michigan Sharpshooters, helping you become well regulated, so together we can preserve our freedoms. Alright, the first thing I'm going to show you is the amazing, super, ridiculous easy way to get rid of the barrel, the receiver wobble, the wobble between the upper and lower receivers. Now, you can go with something like the AccuWedge, which is only like 10-15 bucks, I think, if you go to Brownells. Brownells might be a little higher than that. They're high priced, but they got everything in stock that you need usually. The AccuWedge is a special little plastic wedge, kind of like a rubbery plastic wedge, that you insert into the back of your rifle. Part of it fits underneath the rear takedown pin, and then it kind of comes over and up like that. And it just tightens up things in the very back between your two receivers. But I don't need to do that. And I love how if I just take the rear out, it kind of hinges like that. It just kind of feels cool. Kind of like a brake action. Boom! Put a bullet in. Anyway, so I got an earplug. This is just a squishy foam earplug. And I'm going to put it in here. Get in there. Thank you. Alright. Now I just set that earplug right in there. All the way in the back and as far back as I can and all the way down in the lower. Now I'm going to close it. A little bit slow so that it compresses. It's going to compress all the way down and it won't be in the way of that rear pin anymore. Push the pin in. Very little wiggle right off the bat. Now as that foam kind of expands and relaxes a bit, it's going to, there we go. That took away like 80-90% of the slop and the wiggle that I had there. So that little trick will increase your accuracy, your marksmanship, because now your barrel's not wobbling when you're trying to shoot it. Now we're going to go on to working on that trigger. Alright, you ready for this? Here we go. So now that I've got the stock taken apart here, I'm going to show you guys the two parts that I need to work on. What I'm going to do is do a super simple polishing with no tools required. You can do it fancier with tools and stones or whatnot if you need to, but just the difference this makes without tools is enough that I want everybody to at least know how to do it. Alright, so I've got that hammer in the forward position. See, I just cocked it back again, put my thumb over it, and I'm going to pull the trigger and bring it forward. There's two parts to the hammer in here that we're going to polish. The first one is the main notch right up here. Just inside this little curved part, right in here, there's a notch. See that? Right there. Sticking up right there. That notch in there, we're going to polish that. Specifically the inside of that notch. That's the return position. After I fire it, goes forward, action cycles back again because it's semi-automatic, then I release the trigger, and it goes forward the rest of the way to the full cock position. So I have those two different notches that I'm going to go ahead and polish. This one is only a big deal for the trigger reset. Makes a smoother, crisper trigger reset. That's the main notch up here. This is the trigger reset notch up here. I'm sure there's a fancier term for it, but here, you see that? My light's not the best in here. This notch right in here, that's the trigger reset. Now on the very bottom of that hammer, when it's in this forward position, I can see it. The very bottom is another little notch, much smaller. That's the actual firing notch. That's where, when it's in the firing position, that's where it's connected into. So when I pull the trigger, it fires. That's the part that the trigger releases on. I need to polish both of those. Here's how it's done. Little auto polish, little Q-tip. The Q-tip is just for application. Alright. There we go, get a little more. Squeeze some out. So, right in here, I got it on my Q-tip, right in here. You go ahead and just put a dose of it right like that inside. And I'm going to reach down inside in here and put a little dose in the other notch. Alright, now what that polish is going to do is when the two surfaces come together, kind of like this, the two surfaces are going to rub all of the higher spots together. With the polishing compound in it, it's going to create a naturally mated surface. They're going to polish each other down with the polishing compound. And it goes quite fast, honestly. So here's how we do it. Cock it. I'm going to put my finger up here, or even my whole hand, because I don't want it to actually do anything bad. Alright, pull the trigger, release the hammer forward, pull it all the way back, release the trigger forward. Pull the trigger, release it. Pull the trigger, cock it, release the trigger. Pull the trigger, cock it, release the trigger. Now generally, I will do this, get a little bit more here. I will generally do this about 40 times, and then I will wipe it off and reapply it and do it another 40 times. Okay, do a little more. All right. This just takes a few minutes. I'll see you guys in a few minutes. Alright, I've got this pretty well polished up like that now. You can see the gray that was coming off on my Q-tip when I was wiping the old polish off to put new on. Now, all I'm going to do to clean that up is I'm going to pop out the trigger system, which is just super easy. That's just these two pins right here. Tap them right out. These pieces come right out. It's super easy. They go back together real easy. It's an easy trigger system. You can't put it in wrong. So I'm going to take those out and I'm going to scrub them down in some hot soapy water just to make sure I get all that polishing grit and wax out of there to make it super clean. Then I'm going to oil it up well with some nice clean oil, a good gun oil. And at that point, I'm going to have this trigger down from about a 5.5 pound standard mil-spec trigger down to about a 4 to a 3.5 pound trigger, just in smoothness. It's going to be so smooth just because the surfaces are polished. It's going to be a lot less pull required to pull the trigger. The reset's going to be a lot smoother. It's going to lend itself to more accuracy in a basic mil-spec trigger for an Ar15. This is an amazing thing that's helped me, and I get a lot of comments by guys looking at my trigger saying, hey, this is a mil-spec trigger, why does it feel so good? You know, I custom did it, I tell them. I just Q-tipped and auto-polished it, right? Q-tips and auto-polish, that's all there is to it. Now we're going to pop out the parts in the trigger so we can clean them up, scrub them up good, get them back in, then oil them. All that I need to have to disassemble this is a punch, but I'm going to actually use two punches. I'm going to use a smaller punch on the smaller pins and a bigger punch on the bigger pin. There's 3 pins here. I have these 2, one here and one here. See those? One here, one here. Then I have this here, this safety switch, the safety selector is also a pin. That's the one we got to be careful with. I'll get there in just a minute. We're going to take out the 2 small pins first. They're easy. Just a tap with a punch to get them started, and then pop them out. Now I'm going to pull these out. It's real handy to have a little set of pliers sometimes to help pull out these pins when they're a little bit stubborn. Just be careful not to mar them up too much, because that can interfere with the operation of the trigger. There we go. I find it easier a lot of times to push the hammer or wiggle the hammer a little while I'm pulling that hammer pin out. Okay, now I got it out. So I've got my safety selector halfway between safe and fire. I tapped it almost all the way through this first piece here, the receiver. Now I can rotate it around. I'm going to turn it backwards so that it's pointing, the little arrow's pointing right at me. Now I can pop that trigger right out. Just like that. Alright. Now take a look at where the spring is. Right there. See the spring? The position that the spring is on that hammer. The hammer. Okay, spring goes right like that. It's going to eventually be bent over to give that hammer power to go forward. Spring goes like that. On the trigger, spring goes right like that. Yep. Alright, so now we scrub them up. Now we're going to put them back. Let's put them back together. Got my parts scrubbed up. We're going to put them back in. The first thing that goes back in is the trigger. Just go ahead and slide it in. I'm just going to drop it right in. Alright, I got the trigger in there. Now, this little piece here, it goes right in the middle of the trigger. There's a slot in the trigger. This sets in it with cloth side facing up and forward, just like this. I'm going to put that in and pin it together. Now, as soon as I get the trigger put back in, I'm going to go ahead and turn this pin back around while pushing in. I don't want it to pop out, so I'm going to turn that back in its proper position, and this goes in. Now I'm putting the hammer in. The hammer goes claw side up to start with. Kind of. Claw side backish, upish. Like this. I'm going to put the legs for that spring just behind this first pin, kind of behind over top, like this here. Put them back here. So they're way back down here. Now all I've got to do is push it forward and down, lining up the pinhole, and put the pin back in. There we go. Trigger is fully assembled again. Bingo! The final thing you need to do with this is lubricate it well. I prefer Hoppy's No. 9 gun oil. It's a quality, clean gun oil. It works amazing. There's a bunch of other options out there. I wouldn't ever go with something like a WD-40 or even a 3-in-1 oil unless I'm in an emergency. Then I might try a 3-in-1. But I prefer a very clean oil and something that works good in both hot and cold temperatures. Hoppy's No. 9 is about the best you can get, especially at that price point. So I'm recommending that. Though anything that's labeled as gun oil, not just multi-purpose oil, but if it's labeled as gun oil, it should be good to go. Then you can just drop that in on every contact point in here, anything that turns or moves or rubs. Then just pop your gun back together. That's the easy part. So, this wasn't too long of a project. fairly simple and not a whole lot to it. There we have it. The difference in this trigger is insane. Well, thanks folks for watching Michigan Sharpshooters. I hope you took something from this. Whether or not you even have an AR, you can still use this same basic technique on most firearms, and it will cause a drastic difference in the trigger pull. It causes a smoother and somewhat more crisp trigger pull. It's not the same as having a professional trigger job or as buying a whole new much finer tuned trigger, but those are generally $150 to $200 minimum, and this didn't cost me but maybe 2 cents worth of materials. It took just a little bit of time, a couple cents worth of materials, something that a lot of you guys probably have already. Well, thanks for watching Michigan Sharpshooters today. Like the video if you feel so inclined, and look around to see what else you like. Catch you later. Bye now.